my kitchen again. Today I want to show you a fast and easy way to make one of my very favorite things, which is salsa. I have a bowl of hot peppers here. There's some tomatoes in the bottom, but I have a lot more tomatoes. But anyway, I used to make salsa, and I would spend all the time dicing up all the vegetables, the peppers and the tomatoes. Excuse me. And I would peel the tomatoes, hot water bath them and peel them so the skin wasn't on, because I thought you couldn't have skin in it. And so I developed, it was really painstaking, and I developed a new way to make salsa so that it's really easy. It's not hard. I actually can it, and I do usually 11 or 12 pints at a time. So that's about what I'm going to show you today, is how to make 11 or 12 pints. Okay, so I have tomatoes, and I'm going to put them, I just picked them from the garden. I have a lot of tomatoes, and we won't use all these, but I have this huge box of tomatoes. I told you yesterday that I had a lot of tomatoes in my garden video, and that I needed to make salsa. So here I am, and I should be making probably 2 batches of salsa with everything I have, but we're gonna start it here. So I've rinsed my sink, and I'm going to put tomatoes. Now, I have all kinds of tomatoes. I used to think I needed to have a certain kind of tomato, but you don't. I use big tomatoes, little tomatoes. I use tomatoes with blemishes, spots. I use cherry tomatoes. I've got my bumblebee tomatoes here. I'm going to put those in because you can cut the spots out of them. So in fact, that's a good thing to do with your tomatoes that have blemishes. So I'm going to add them to my sink so they can soak and get rinsed off before I put them. I'm going to roast them on a pan. I have a pan here that I'm going to put them all in. And what we'll do for 1 batch of salsa is about 4 of these. And that's tomatoes, peppers, onions. I'll just put them in there. I've turned my oven on to 425. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start dicing up, not dicing up, we're going to actually chunk our tomatoes in large. And I'm going to use a lot of peppers. But you can make it as hot or as mild as you want. My family prefers hot salsa. Like the kind that makes you sweat when you eat it. A lot of people don't like that, I know. Uncle came and stayed with me last summer, and we made salsa, and he wanted his extremely mild. So there's a big old fat tomato that something ate a bite out of. So I'm going to put that in there, and I will cut that out. So I just kind of mix peppers and tomatoes and onions in the pan to roast them. So I'm going to start to do that right now. I just cut the tops out. Alright, so we're going to focus down here on what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to cut these in pieces, leaving the skin on about like this size. And just throw them in the roaster pan. So that is really easy. And I will mix tomatoes, peppers, and onions. I'm going to leave that. I don't want to put the tops that I cut off in. If you have any spots or anything, definitely cut that out. This one, because we're going to leave the skin on, so we don't want any spots in it. Like this one, I'll just cut in a 1/4. There's a spot on that one. So I used to spend so much time dicing, and I don't do that anymore. So because I like hot, I cut my jalapenos in half and I leave the seeds in. Because we like it spicy. Spicier the better. And like I said, my oven is on 425, preheating. And I'll just cut these up. Now, you will see me throw a few yellow tomatoes in here. But yellow tomatoes are not as acid as red tomatoes. So, just to be sure, And I grow so many different varieties of tomatoes. Just to be sure that my tomatoes are acid enough, I'm going to add vinegar to my recipe. Because if something doesn't have acid in it, you cannot hot water bath it. It would have to be pressure canned. And I just do hot water canning right now for my salsa. And out of all the years, I have only ever had 2 jars. The seals go bad on them. So that's not too bad because I've made a lot of salsa. Here's this big, I don't know, I think this is a mortgage lifter tomato, but it's shaped kind of like an ox heart tomato, so it may have cross-pollinated at some time or something. Anyway, that's a huge, meaty tomato. I usually like to throw a few Amish paste or some kind of tomato that's really meaty in here. And I didn't bring any Amish paste in today, but usually I do. Now, you'll notice that I'm putting in all different kinds of peppers in here because I grow all kinds of peppers. And while I'm sure to get my jalapenos in here for the heat, actually the mixture of peppers gives it a really good flavor. So I just use a mixture of peppers because I like that. And I'm not going to give you exact amounts because it wouldn't matter because you need to make salsa that suits the taste buds of your family. So you can see my pan's getting filled up here. And I used to think that I had to set aside a whole day for making and canning salsa, and now it's evening. It's actually almost dinner time, and I'm starting some. This is that easy, and it's the best salsa. We have a restaurant here in the Midwest, and I don't know where all they're located, but it's called Margaritas, and the salsa that I make is pretty blended up. You cannot have it blended up. You can have it chunky and still use this method, but we just like it blended, and we like it kind of like, it comes out much like margarita salsa that you buy from the restaurant or at the grocery store. And I have lots of jalapenos right now in my garden, and they are all pretty hot, I gotta say. So I'm going to add another tomato here, and then I don't want to pile this high because I want these to all get a good roast on it. So I'm going to do one more tomato, and then I'll add some onions in here. Onions and peppers. Alright, I've got some onions from the garden. I'm going to cut them up and just put them in chunks in here as well. No need to dice them up, which makes this so easy. So you may hear a rooster crow in my videos. It's not a real rooster. It's because I want a rooster. And I can have, when you're making videos, you can have anything you want, right? So I want a rooster in my videos. And I can have chickens here. I cannot have a rooster. But anyway, I've always wanted, I love the sound of a rooster crowing. But I can't have one, so, and I'm going to add a rooster to this. So anyway, here is what this looks like. It's all just cut up in large chunks. And now I am going to put it into the oven on 425. I'm going to put it in the oven on 425, and we're going to let it bake. Now I'm going to do 4 pans like this. That's about what it takes for a batch of my salsa. I've got some other pans I'm going to use and keep cutting things up. But I'm going to put that in, and I'm going to roast that until the tips of everything, until the tomatoes are really hot and cooked and kind of squishy, the tips of everything will have a little bit of black on them because it gives it that roasted flavor. And I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of this up and clean up my workspace, and I'll be right back. Hey, I'm back, and all my vegetables are roasted. Is my last pan I took out, and I actually did use all those tomatoes, so I'm making a larger batch than I normally do. So I had 5 pans of this. And there's one thing I didn't mention, that when I like to use some cherry tomatoes, and when I do, I just throw them in whole. So you don't even have to cut cherry tomatoes. They're small enough the way they are. Now I'm going to use a slotted spoon. I've got the rest of it all in my pan here. But I'm going to use a slotted spoon and put it all into a big Dutch oven sized pan. And I'm draining the water. I'm using the spoon with holes in it so that all of this juice that's in the bottom of the pan stays in the pan. And because it would just dilute the salsa, and I want a really flavorful salsa. So we're going to take the water out. And I'm just going to dip and let it drain and put it all in the big pot. And there's still going to be a lot of liquid in your pot because there just is plenty of liquid in those tomatoes. But you can see the tomatoes are squishy, the peppers are cooked thoroughly, and the onions have turned transparent. And there's a little char on some, and that makes it taste good. So I'm going to set this over here, and we're going to start adding things to the salsa. I'm going to put this on so that you can see. Okay, so here's the pot of salsa, and you can see it's really chunky in here, but there is a lot of liquid in there. And I'm going to add my cilantro. Now my cilantro is just fresh, so I'm going to definitely want to turn the burner on under this, because I'm going to want to cook this a little more, because I want everything to be at boiling temp when I go to put it in the jars. Okay, another thing I'm going to add is garlic, and I like it really garlicky, so we're going to use about 3 tablespoons, and they're heaping tablespoons of garlic because I like garlic in it. And for the sake of time, you can dice your own garlic up if you want to, but I just use prepared garlic and it works out just fine, and it gives it a really good flavor. Okay, for apple cider vinegar, and like I told you before, just because I do use lots of variety of tomatoes, I want to be sure that it's acid, since I'm going to do a hot water bath. So I'm going to put about 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar in there. Like the way I measured that? Okay. Alright, we need some salt, and I'm going to put 2, and again, the cilantro, the salt, the garlic is all optional, and you can just use whatever tastes, you like. The apple cider vinegar is not optional. You need to use that in there if you're going to do a hot water bath. I'm going to put some cumin in, probably 2 teaspoons of cumin would be fine in that. And this is what makes it, we like, is chili spice in there. And I'm going to sprinkle, I'm going to say about, for this much, and this is a large batch, I'm going to sprinkle almost half the package. Maybe not quite, but almost. Alright, and this is actually cooking. You can see that it's kind of boiling in here a little. So, that doesn't look like salsa yet, right? It's really chunky, and so the magic part that's going to blend it all together is going to be this immersion blender. And this is what makes it so simple. Now you got to be careful because I've got this almost to a boil, and I'm going to use this immersion blender, and it can splash. But I'm going to use it, and it will blend everything up in here. And it really doesn't even take very long. This out, it will splash you, so you don't want to get burned. You can see that it's getting really blended up. There's a few peppers that I need to get in there, but I never have chunks in it, so it blends up pretty well. It gets the cilantro all mixed in there. Don't like it so smooth, you don't have to blend it this much, but we do. And it gets pretty thick as it cools because I've taken all that water out. When I dipped the tomatoes out, I left the water in the pan and I just dumped it, and that's why this is going to be a pretty thick salsa. Now we're going. We're pretty smooth now at this point. Alright, I think we're okay. I don't see any chunks in it. Alright, we'll get rid of this. And I'm going to turn it down a little bit so it doesn't burn, but I do have it still going on the burner because at this point it's important to keep it hot because I'm going to ladle it into some jars for canning. So everybody has their own way of hot water bath canning, and I have mine. There's one more step though that I forgot, and I don't want to miss this step because it's the most important step of all. And that is to taste your product, to be sure that your salt and everything is like you like it. But it's pretty hot. It is definitely spicy hot. Okay, I think everything is good. And I've got it as low as I can get it. So this is how I hot water can. I have a cooker here that I've been filling up with smaller pans of water because it will not fit on the stove while I'm doing all this. So I've got this canner, hot water canner over here that I've been filling with hot water with this small pan as I've been cooking here. So it's going to be pretty hot. I'll still have to bring it up to a boil, but it won't take much. So I use a wooden spoon. Let me see if my camera's good here. I use a wooden spoon and I just put those in there. I have the thing that you can actually grab the jars with, and I'll use that later on, but for this, this allows me to empty the water right out of the jars. And as I take these out, then I'm going to be putting more in. So that my jars, my rings, my lids, everything is in the hot water. So, put 3 more jars in, and I kind of roll them in there so they get down in the water. And I have jar filler and a ladle. And after I'm sure that this has reached a really good little boil, that this is thoroughly heated all the way through, I'm gonna ladle it into the jars. And I will wanna fill it, and these are hot, just to the shoulder. Don't fill it any higher than the shoulder on the jar, because you'll need it to get a good seal on it. And I'm gonna get a little towel here, because it's important to wipe off the tops of your jars. So I'm gonna use a towel. You can use a paper towel if you want, but I get it wet, and I just have it laying here to be sure that I don't have anything on the tops of the jars. So I'm gonna start ladling this into my jars. And get it right up to the shoulder. It's very hot. And often I'll dip and mix as I do it so that I don't, because I've got it still boiling here, just at a soft boil, but I want to keep the heat distributed throughout, and I don't want it to burn. So, and if you get any on the outside of your jars, you don't worry about it at this point. We'll deal with that later. Okay, so you can see how high I filled this. It's hard for me to pick up because it's really hot, but I've left about an inch at the top. And that's just what you want. And I'm going to completely, I'm going to say this is probably going to make about 14 jars. And I bought some jars the other day. I found some at Walmart, which jars are hard to find right now. And I put them in my car. It was 105 degrees and the lids started popping on them, and they started sealing right there in their package. So I would not trust that lid with my salsa. I've worked too hard on it, and so I want lids that I know I can trust. So those are cleaned off. Now I have this handy little tool. This is an amazing little thing. I bought this off of Amazon, and it's a magnet. So it can reach down in the pan and pick up a lid. Let's see if I can get the right size lid here. I've got too many lids in my pan probably to, there we go. Okay, I've got one now. I like to pick it up by this side. Okay, I pick it up like this, and then I just put it on each jar. And you want to keep everything sanitary. It's important. That's why I boil the lids, I boil the rings, and I boil the jars. Okay, I've got these three ready to go. I'm going to put rings on them. And just set it on there for a minute, and that'll give it a second to cool off a little bit. Maybe I didn't put rings for the regular sized mouth jars in there, so I'm going to grab a couple and throw in the water, and I'll give them just a second to cook in there. Okay, so when I tighten these down, I'm going to hand tighten it all the way down, but I'm not going to push it as hard as I can, because as this seals, air is going to have to come out of the jar. So just put it, tighten it, but just a natural tightening, not anything. Don't over tighten your tops on there. Okay, I've got two more ready to go. All right, and we're going to do this with all of our jars, just like this. I usually do 3 at a time, and then I'll set them I set them on a towel. You don't ever want to set this on your counter, and because it's so hot, you don't want to set it on a cold counter anyway. And now I have an air conditioner vent right here, close to this, so I will actually put a dish towel over these so that cool air doesn't hit them, because you can get a cracked jar if air conditioner vent blows right into it. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jar up the rest of this just like I showed you, and then I will be back to show you the next step. Anyway, this tastes really good. I hope you try it. And it is oh so easy. Hello, I'm back. And I actually did 15 quarts, which was more than I thought I had here. So I've got my pressure, not pressure, but my hot water canner on. And I've had water heating in that. So like I said, I've been working on that while I was doing my salsa. I actually had the pan going, sitting over here on a towel on the counter, and I was adding boiling water to that while we were going. Now I'm going to put my hot jars in here, and while I've been doing this, some of them have been, the seals have been popping on them, but I'm going to hot water bath them anyway, and I do pints for 15 minutes once the water reaches a hard boil. Now I want to remind you to be sure before you put your lids on to always wipe the top of your jar down, because if you splash anything on that at all, it will cause your jars not to seal if it's even the littlest drop of sauce. So we've gone to too much trouble and too much work to have them not seal. So we're going to put these in here, and I'm going to very carefully, I keep them upright. If you ever tip them, they can spew, so you try not to do that. I have had them go over tip in the hot water bath, but I just take my little tongs and lift them back up and set them real carefully again. So we're going to set these down in here, and I'm going to be sure that they all stay set up. Now, I'm going to wait until this comes up to a boil again before I start my timer. Because I want to be sure that I'm getting a good seal on these. So I'm going to put the lid on so it keeps the heat on, and let it come to a boil, and then we'll see what happens. Alright, there's our timer and our first batch, the water bath, has processed for 15 minutes. Now I tip it just a tiny bit to dump that water off, but not much. Now I'm going to put these toward the back here. And when you take your jars out of the hot water, you do not, and set them down on the towel, you do not want them to touch each other. So keep them set upright, up straight, and not touching each other. And you'll start hearing popping sometimes right away. Sometimes it takes a while, but most of the time, mine start popping the minute they come out. And you can, the jars start to cool. Now if there's some water on top, don't worry about it. It won't hurt anything, it'll evaporate, and if not, you can wipe it off later. I've made more than usual, so I've kind of run out of room here. I'm going to be sure and keep separate. Can you hear that pop? What I've processed and what I haven't, so I don't get them mixed up. So there's 4. 5 and 6. Alright. Alright, now I'm going to get ready to process my next batch. Turn the burner back up. I turned it off just right before I opened the lid on here, so you do want to keep it hot all the time. And we're going to get our next batch ready in here. And set them very carefully around. Now I do have 1 quart jar here, and I will have to do it last, raise the water level, and I will process it for a little bit longer, probably 20 minutes at least. These are all really hot, so it doesn't take much to get them back up to the boiling point once they're in here. But Okay, so they all fit. No, they don't all. Yeah. As I say, they all fit except for the cord, but I have 2 left. And I'm going to put this back down, and I will set my timer for another 15 minutes. And I will go ahead and process this up. I think I've shown you everything that you would need to know on how to do this and how to process it. I just had a jar kind of tipped to the side in there, so I'm going to set it right back up before I put the lid on. And I will set my timer for another 15 minutes. Okay. All right. I think I've shown you everything that you need to know about making salsa. This is a really super simple method. I hope you'll try it. And you can make it hot or spicy or garlicky or, however much cilantro you like. Or if you don't like cilantro. I know a lot of people think it tastes like soap. I absolutely love cilantro. The more the better for me, but if you don't like it, you won't want to add cilantro to it. So anyway, I hope you try to make some salsa. It's great. It's tomato season. So there's a lot available out there. Even if you have to go to a market and buy them, it's a fun thing to try. So thanks for joining me.